"You're here to deliver something, sir," the butler asked, his voice laced with suspicion and his eyes scanning Victor's face as if trying to place him in a cast he could understand. "No," Victor replied, not missing a beat. "I'm here for the meeting with Miss Whitmore." He said it evenly, but with the quiet weight of someone who'd had to repeat his legitimacy one too many times. The butler raised an eyebrow, a slow, incredulous smirk creeping across his pale face. "Oh my God," he muttered under his breath, not low enough to be missed. "Did I just hear that right? A black man claiming to have a seat at the table? Here, at Whitmore Manor?" He laughed once, short and sharp, like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd heard all week. "Ain't that something? Dressed like a banker, but probably just lost." Then, like a performance, he turned stiffly and gestured with 2 fingers, barely hiding his disdain. "This way, sir." Victor didn't respond. He'd walked through worse doors with heavier weights on his back. But as he stepped into the grand foyer of the Whitmore estate, the chill from the outside air lingered in his bones, compounded by the ice in that man's tone. The house was a museum of old money, mahogany beams, cathedral ceilings, portraits of steel tycoons and shipping magnates, their stern white faces staring down as if still guarding their fortune. Victor's shoes clicked across the Italian marble, but the silence around him was louder than footsteps. Victor Freeman, 46, wasn't a man easily shaken. Former U.S. Army field medic turned biotech CEO, he had built Medcore Innovations from his own savings and 2 patents he'd developed working overnight shifts at a federal research lab. His company now stood at the precipice of history, poised to partner with the Whitmores on a regenerative therapy that could change the future of medicine and net both companies nearly $1 billion. But in that house, under those eyes living and painted, he already felt unwelcome. In the formal dining room, 3 figures awaited. Rose Whitmore, the matriarch of the pharmaceutical empire, stood near the window, her posture perfect, her platinum hair twisted into a chignon that suggested ballet more than boardroom. Her tailored cream suit blended seamlessly into the ivory wallpaper, as if she had no intention of ever standing out or ever needing to. "Ah," she said, her voice carrying the sing-song of insincere surprise. "You're Mr. Freeman." Victor nodded. "Pleasure to meet you in person, Miss Whitmore." And she approached and extended her hand like it was made of porcelain, fragile and distant. "I must admit, I wasn't expecting you, quite like this." Victor smiled slightly. Gray suit, brown skin, it throws people off. Rose's smile thinned. Beside her, Carter Whitmore, the family's legal counsel and Rose's younger brother, didn't bother standing. He remained seated, sipping something amber from a crystal tumbler and eyeing Victor like a man watching someone walk on his lawn. Then came Arthur Whitmore, the patriarch. His cane thudded against the floor as he stood to greet the guest. Tall, wiry, and dressed in a suit that reeked of heritage, Arthur's handshake was firm but fleeting. "You're younger than I expected," he said without prelude. Victor took his seat, unfolding his documents. "Experience doesn't always come with gray hair, nor does it come with ambition," Arthur replied dryly, settling into his chair with effort. "Sometimes it just comes from wanting more than your lot." The opening pleasantries were over. For the next 15 minutes, Victor guided them through figures, forecasts, and technical frameworks. He laid out the joint venture with clarity and composure, highlighting its promise and shared value. But as he spoke, he could see it. The flicker in Rose's eyes, the subtle twitches in Carter's smirk, the tightening of Arthur's jaw not at the science, but at the scientist. "Tell me," Rose asked sweetly, interrupting him mid-sentence, "where did you study again?" "MIT," Victor replied. "And before that?" "Johns Hopkins." She nodded, slowly, as if digesting a strange recipe. "First in your family to attend college?" Victor met her Chaze. "Yes." "Impressive," she said. "That's like seeing a horse ride a bicycle." Carter laughed into his glass. Victor didn't. He leaned back in his chair, gaze steady. Arthur joined in the condescension. "Tell me, Mr. Freeman, how does a man from inner-city Baltimore find himself in a room like this?" Victor replied, "By doing what most people born into rooms like this never had to fight for it." The room went still. Even Carter stopped swirling his drink. But Rose wasn't finished. "And your daughter? She's what, 12? "Correct." "Well," she said, folding her hands together, "maybe one day she'll be able to intern here, get some real-world experience." Victor stood. Intern? You mean serve the champagne? Carter straightened. Now let's not turn this into something ugly. Victor reached for the unsigned contract. It became ugly the moment I walked in this house. You'd walk away from this deal? Rose said, her voice hardening. I'd walk away from any table where I'm not seen as an equal, Victor replied. Even if that table's made of mahogany and smeared in $1 billion worth of empty smiles. He turned and walked out. Not a single footstep followed. Outside, the air was crisp, autumn biting gently at his skin. Victor stood beside his car, staring at the driveway lined with trees trimmed like soldiers. His phone buzzed. A message from Maya. Did they like you? Victor typed back. They never saw me, but I saw them, and that he thought was enough. If Victor's courage stirred something in you, please like and share this story, and leave a comment if you've ever faced a moment where you had to stand tall in the face of injustice. Victor drove in silence, the tires of his sleek black sedan whispering against the road as dusk descended over the hills of Connecticut. His GPS directed him back to the city, but his mind wandered elsewhere, back to a time before he wore tailored suits, before the accolades, before people had to act shocked when he entered a room as a CEO. He remembered his mother's hands cracked, stained, and always moving. She used to say, "Some people are born into their seat at the table, baby. You'll have to build your own." Tonight, he had walked away from a gold-plated table, and all he could think about was how proud she would have been. Back in New York, the city lights twinkled like stars, too impatient to wait for nightfall. Victor parked outside his apartment, a modest but comfortable brownstone in Harlem. As he entered, Maya ran to him, arms outstretched. 12 years old, full of fire, and smarter than he was at her age. "How'd it go?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. Victor hesitated for a split second, then smiled. "They didn't sign, but I did something better." Maya tilted her head. "Better than $900 million? He ruffled her hair. "Better for you, better for us." The next morning, headlines started trickling in. Business gossip sites, industry blogs. None of them knew the full story yet, but the whispers were growing. Victor Freeman walks out of historic merger meeting. The Whitmore PR machine would soon respond. Victor knew that much. They'd paint it as a misunderstanding or claim irreconcilable visions. But the truth was a silent scream, and he had no intention of letting it fade. In the boardroom at Medcor the following day, Victor faced his own executive team. The room was glass-walled, modern, efficient, but there was tension in the air. Denise, his COO and longtime friend, broke the silence. "Tell me you didn't just nuke our future." Her tone was half playful, half serious. Victor sighed. "We're not going into business with a family that sees us as entertainment. That's not a future I want." The head of finance, Martin, leaned forward. "They're powerful, Vic. They control half the clinical supply chain. We alienate them. We risk losing access to what?" Victor cut in. "To people who would smile to our faces while questioning our humanity behind our backs?" He stood, moving toward the large screen that displayed their growth charts. "We've built something real, something clean. I won't let it get tainted because some legacy billionaires want to absorb us and spit us out sanitized." Denise crossed her arms. "So what now?" "We wait," Victor said. "And while we wait, we tell the truth." Later that evening, Victor sat at his kitchen table drafting an op-ed. Every word poured like concrete, slow but permanent. He wrote about growing up black in a country that only tolerated ambition when it came from the right zip code. He wrote about his mother, her hands, and the nights she bled so he could dream. He wrote about respect earned and denied. And finally, he wrote about what happened at the Whitmore estate, every word a small hammer chipping at the marble of silence. 2 days later, it was published in The Atlantic. The title, "I Wasn't Invited to the Table, I Built My Own." Within hours, it went viral. Emails flooded in, some from strangers, some from former classmates who used to ignore him, others from black professionals who had sat in similar rooms and bit their tongues until they bled. Denise forwarded him a message from a small biotech firm in Detroit. They wanted to talk about collaboration, not charity partnership. Victor smiled. The tide was turning, but not everyone was pleased. A letter arrived by courier, sealed with the Whitmore crest. Inside, a thinly veiled threat. "While we regret your decision, we remind you that slander is a serious offense." Let's not ruin reputations that took lifetimes to build." Victor read the letter twice, then burned it in the sink. That evening, as he and Maya watched a documentary about the Tuskegee trials, her school project, she turned to him and asked, "Why did they do that to people like us?" Victor swallowed hard. "Because they thought no one would stop them." She was quiet for a while. Then, "Did you stop someone today?" He nodded. "Yes, and I'll do it again tomorrow if I have to." 3 days later, Victor received a call from Senator Lillian Grant's office. She wanted to meet privately. A black senator from Georgia, known for her fiery speeches and commitment to equity and healthcare, Grant was both feared and admired on the Hill. Victor met her at a quiet corner cafe in D.C., just outside the noise of the Capitol. She got straight to the point. "You walked away from money. That takes guts. It also gets attention." Victor didn't blink. It wasn't about attention. She smiled. "Good, because now people are paying it. There's a movement building. I want you to speak at the Equity and Medicine Summit. Tell them what happened." Victor hesitated. "They won't want to hear it." She leaned in. "That's exactly why you need to say it." That night, back in Harlem, Victor stood on his balcony, looking out at the city. Maya joined him, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She leaned against his arm. "Dad? Yeah, baby? You ever feel scared after doing the right thing?" He laughed softly. "Every time." She sipped her cocoa. "But you still do it?" He nodded. "Because if I don't, who will?" And in that quiet space between night and morning, Victor Freeman, former soldier, single father, and the man who walked away from the gilded table knew the battle wasn't over. But the first move had been made, and it had been the right one. Victor adjusted the knot on his tie as he stood backstage, the low murmur of 1,000 attendees humming through the auditorium walls like a storm waiting to break. The Equity and Medicine Summit wasn't just a conference, it was a battleground dressed in suits and lanyards, where data and policy collided with lived experiences. Senator Grant's team had placed him right after a panel of Ivy League scholars who spoke in rehearsed rhythms and buzzwords like inclusivity and diversity pipeline. He wasn't there to echo them, he was there to tell the truth, raw and unvarnished. The event producer gave him the cue. Victor stepped onto the stage beneath the blaze of white lights, the applause polite but cautious. He walked slowly to the podium, surveying the audience. Government officials, healthcare executives, activists, skeptics, and somewhere, maybe even allies. He leaned toward the mic, his voice steady. "I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to make you feel something you've spent decades avoiding: accountability." The air shifted, heads turned, phones came out. "When I walked away from a $900 million deal with Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, I wasn't making a political statement. I was protecting my daughter from the kind of rooms that told me I didn't belong." A gasp echoed from a woman in the third row. Victor continued, "We talk about access, representation, equity, but none of it matters if we allow old systems to dress themselves in new language and keep functioning as they always have." His voice rose, not in volume but in clarity. "We've praised the exceptional black CEO while ignoring the fact that he had to be exceptional just to be invited to the same table where mediocrity wears a crown if it's born in the right skin." The silence afterward was heavy, not awkward, but reverent. When he stepped down, the applause roared, long and urgent. Senator Grant met him backstage, her eyes moist. "You didn't hold back," she said. Victor shrugged. "Didn't know how." Later that evening, clips of his speech went viral. Twitter was ablaze. Headlines ranged from "Victor Freeman speaks truth to power" to "Biotech maverick slams industry elitism." But not all the responses were celebratory. Death threats came via anonymous emails. A brick shattered the front window of Medcor's Baltimore office. A note taped to the glass read, "Know your place." Victor didn't flinch. He upgraded security and kept working. That weekend, Denise arranged a team retreat, something low profile at a rural inn outside of Albany. They needed time to recalibrate, away from flashbulbs and boardrooms. The team sat around a large wooden table by a fireplace, steam rising from coffee mugs and minds burdened by stress. "So what's the next move?" Martin asked. Victor looked out the window at the falling snow. "We double down on who we are, not who they expect us to be." "Meaning?" Denise pressed. "Meaning," Victor said, turning back. "We launched Genetica without the Whitmores. On our terms. Full scale." "You're talking independent rollout?" "That's Ambitious, Martin muttered. It's righteous, Denise corrected, her eyes fixed on Victor's. Let's do it. Over the next 2 months, MedCore turned into a hive. Teams worked overtime. Strategic partnerships were formed with smaller, minority-owned labs and clinics across the country. They didn't need legacy support, they built a new network. Grassroots, ground level. Patients were waiting, and MedCore refused to wait for gatekeepers to give them permission. Meanwhile, the Whitmores launched their smear campaign. Unstable, they called Victor in interviews. Uncooperative. They painted him as arrogant, impulsive. Rose went on CNBC, smiling like nothing had ever passed between them but professionalism. "We wish Mr. Freeman well," she said. "He simply lacked the experience to manage such a large integration." Victor didn't respond, not directly. He let the results speak. Genetica launched quietly in February, with clinical trials already showing remarkable outcomes in spinal tissue regeneration. Within 3 weeks, 10 clinics signed on, then 20, then 60. Patient testimonies flooded in videos of men and women walking again, of children hugging their parents without pain. CBS picked up the story, then NPR, then 60 Minutes. And always in the background was Victor, calm, relentless, refusing to be erased. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of back-to-back meetings and media calls, Victor and Maya shared dinner on the rooftop. She had just turned 13. He'd cooked her favorite baked salmon with mac and cheese, just like her grandmother used to make. As they ate, Maya looked at him and said, "Did you know they call you the Ghost CEO?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Ghost? Yeah, 'cause you keep moving in silence and making things happen." He laughed. "I like that." She smiled. "Me too." Then she got serious. "Some kids at school said you're making things harder for people like us." He paused. "Did that upset you?" "No," she said. "It made me proud, but I didn't know what to say." He put down his fork. "Next time, tell them some battles are meant to be loud, and some victories happen in silence, like seeds growing underground." She nodded slowly, the words sinking in. By March, Genetica had outpaced every expectation. Investors who once hesitated now clamored for a seat at the table. But Victor was careful. He turned down 2 major pharmaceutical offers and instead partnered with a network of Black-owned hospitals in the South. He called it economic reparations in motion. When asked about the Whitmores at a Stanford panel, he simply said, "I don't build bridges that lead back to fire." But the true test came when a young researcher from within MedCore came forward with evidence that the Whitmores had attempted to sabotage a trial site in Georgia. Emails, financial pressure on suppliers, bribes offered to delay shipments. Victor reviewed the proof, then gathered his legal team. They filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. The announcement shook the industry. The Whitmores, once untouchable, were now under investigation. Arthur Whitmore denied all allegations. Rose vanished from public view. Victor watched it all from his office window. Maya's latest school drawing pinned to the wall behind him. It showed 2 trees, one short and golden, one tall and black with deep roots. Beneath it, she had written, "Only one can weather the storm." He stared at it for a long time, knowing that the storm wasn't over. But the roots, his roots, were finally holding. Victor stared at the digital document glowing softly on his laptop screen, the DOJ complaint file complete and submitted. It was a quiet triumph, but one laced with tension. He knew that what came next wouldn't be a clean court battle played out with calm depositions and polite litigation. No, when you shook a dynasty like the Whitmores, they didn't just fight back. They struck from the shadows. The next morning, Victor arrived at MedCore to find a line of journalists outside. Not the usual crowd covering biotech innovation, but tabloid reporters, ones who specialized in digging through garbage literally and figuratively. "Mr. Freeman, is it true you falsified your academic credentials? Are you hiding offshore accounts? Did you use insider knowledge to tank the Whitmore deal?" He pushed past them without a word. Upstairs, Denise was already in his office. "Damage control?" he asked. She nodded grimly. "They leaked a fake transcript to the press, says you never graduated from MIT. "They're not even subtle," he muttered. "We've already contacted the registrar and prepared a formal response. But it's not about the facts anymore. It's about sowing doubt." "Then we keep showing up," he said. "Every lie they throw, we counter it with truth and results." At noon, Victor was invited to a private roundtable with black leaders in medicine and science, hosted by a think tank in D.C. It wasn't about deals or investments. It was about strategy, protection, legacy. Men and women who had faced versions of his story and survived barely. As he entered the elegant but understated conference room, he felt a strange kind of calm. These weren't people impressed by headlines or afraid of controversy. They knew too well the cost of excellence in the wrong skin. Dr. Evelyn Ford, a legendary oncologist, began the session. "Victor," she said, "you've stepped into a fire that was lit long before you. How far are you willing to go?" "All the way," he replied without hesitation. "Then you need to prepare for what all the way means," she said. "They'll come after your daughter, your friends. They'll frame your success as aggression, your dignity as arrogance." Victor nodded. "They already have." "Good," she said. "Then you know you're over the target." That night, as he tucked Maya into bed, she asked softly, "Do you think it's okay to make enemies?" He looked at her, startled by the weight of her question. "Why do you ask?" "A boy at school said his dad said you're trying to tear down good people." Victor's jaw tightened. "Did that hurt you?" She shook her head. "It made me wonder if maybe some people think they're good when they're not." He kissed her forehead. "The truth is, Maya, if you stand up for what's right long enough, the wrong people will always think you're the enemy. That's how you know you're doing something worth remembering." Oh. The next week, Genetica crossed its 100,000th patient trial benchmark. The results were not just promising, they were historic. Peer-reviewed studies began to circulate. Top journals scrambled for interviews. But in the shadows, the Whitmores escalated their retaliation. A whistleblower lawsuit, filed anonymously, accused Victor of unethical human trials. The claim was baseless, but the media devoured it. Investors panicked. One of their largest contracts, a distribution deal with a New England hospital network, was suddenly suspended, pending clarification. At the emergency board meeting, voices rose. "This is a crisis," one executive barked. "You need to step down until the matter is resolved." Victor stood slowly, his calm a mask for the storm behind his eyes. "So we punish integrity with exile. That's how systems collapse. Not from sabotage, but from cowardice." Denise stood beside him. "We stand with Victor, and if you don't, you know where the door is." Silence. No one moved. They stayed. Within days, independent investigators cleared Victor. The lawsuit was exposed as fraudulent, filed using a fake identity. The news barely made the front page. But it didn't matter. The tide had turned. Patients, doctors, community leaders, they rallied. Hashtags spread, "We see Victor," "Built not bought," "Roots run deep." Maya came home with a school project. Write about someone brave. She'd drawn her father, standing on a cliff edge, holding a torch, while shadows tried to pull him down. "Is that me?" he asked. "It's what you make me feel like," she replied. He blinked fast, heart full. Late one evening, Victor received an unexpected call. The DOJ was escalating the investigation into a formal federal probe. They wanted his testimony not just on sabotage, but on the culture of collusion in the pharmaceutical industry. He knew what that meant. It wasn't just about the Whitmores anymore. It was about systemic rot, and they needed someone willing to pull the veil. He said yes. At the Senate hearing weeks later, Victor sat under oath. His voice didn't shake. He named names, described tactics, recounted meetings, laced with coded language and quiet threats. Cameras broadcasted his words to millions. Arthur Whitmore issued a denial that afternoon. "These accusations are not only false, they're un-American," he growled into the mic. But the damage was done. A senior VP resigned. A whistleblower from within Whitmore's own company came forward, confirming everything. Back in Harlem, Victor walked home from the subway one cold spring evening, his coat flapping in the wind like a flag. A man across the street recognized him. "Freeman," he called. "Thank you for not backing down," Victor nodded, smiling. The weight of the fight was still on his shoulders, but it no longer bent him. Maya was waiting at the door when he arrived. "They aired the hearing at school," she said. People clapped. "Did you?" he asked. She grinned. "I stood up." That night, as he stared at the stars above his rooftop, Victor realized something. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat, and his was finally heard. Victor awoke to a soft knock on his bedroom door, the kind that suggested urgency wrapped in restraint. He sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Maya stood in the doorway, her small frame outlined by the hallway light. "Dad, there are reporters outside, a lot of them." He threw on a hoodie and moved swiftly to the living room. Outside, the street pulsed with headlights and camera flashes. Helicopters droned overhead, and the sidewalk buzzed with tension. He flipped on the television. Every major network was broadcasting the same explosive headline: DOJ probe expands. Freeman to deliver key, testimony linking. Big Pharma to racial discrimination in clinical trials. The narrative had shifted. It wasn't about biotech anymore, it was about justice, history, and bloodlines. That morning, Victor drove Maya to school himself. As they pulled up, a crowd had gathered, students, teachers, even janitors clapping in unison. Some held handmade signs. "Thank you, Victor." Justice in healthcare. Maya slouched in the passenger seat, her face pink with embarrassment. "They're not here for me," Victor said gently. "They're here because the truth frightens people who've built power on silence." She looked up at him, a flicker of understanding behind her cautious smile. Back at MedCorp, his office had transformed into a war room. Legal advisors, PR strategists, cybersecurity teams moved with urgency. Denise walked in holding 2 coffees and a grim look. "We got a subpoena for all internal communications going back to 2016, and the media's grilling us on the accusations about Whitmore's discriminatory trial practices." Victor inhaled deeply. "Give them everything. No redactions. The truth is our shield." Denise gave a tired smile. "You realize you're setting a precedent that'll make half this industry flinch?" Victor replied, "Good. Let them know transparency isn't a courtesy. It's a weapon." Inze. 3 days later, Victor entered the Senate chamber under high security. The room was packed. Reporters, legislators, activists, eyes locked on him. A Southern senator leaned in, slow drawl dripping with skepticism. "Mr. Freeman, are you aware your testimony could dismantle pharmaceutical institutions that've been around longer than you've been alive?" Victor looked straight at him. "If those institutions were built by exploiting the voiceless, then maybe it's time they collapse." A gasp swept the room. He didn't flinch. He presented evidence, emails, internal memos, call transcripts, a damning trail of systemic exclusion, black and brown subjects used for high-risk trials while being excluded from profit-sharing research or access to advanced care. The room stilled, heavy with realization. A senator from Illinois leaned forward. "Mr. Freeman, what do you want from all this?" He paused. "I want a healthcare system where being born black doesn't shorten your life expectancy, where no child has to watch their parent die wondering if race played a part. I want medicine to serve people, not profit margins." As Victor exited the chamber, a young black medical student approached him in tears. "Thank you," she said. "You've said what we've whispered in hallways for years." Victor placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Now whisper it louder, and don't stop." Meanwhile, Rose Whitmore reemerged. Her family released a cold statement. "Victor Freeman is exploiting racial tension for personal gain." Right-wing pundits pounced, but the momentum had turned. Journalists unearthed footage of Rose at private fundraisers laughing at racially charged jokes. The internet exploded. Petitions circulated demanding her removal from advisory boards. Within a week, she lost her positions at 3 major institutions. Her family's stock value dipped 15%. That evening, Victor found a package on his doorstep. Inside, a fountain pen with a note. "They wrote us out of history with pens like this. Now write us back in. No signature. Just a return address in Montgomery, Alabama." He placed the pen on his desk beside Maya's latest drawing 2 trees, one golden and shallow-rooted, the other dark and reaching deep. The next morning, he gathered his executive team. "We've spent months defending. Now we go on the offensive." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. "I want a scholarship fund for Black and Latino med students. Name it after Dr. Evelyn Ford. I want mobile clinics in low-income neighborhoods. Publish our research free. No paywalls, no access barriers." Martin blinked. "That's a lot," Denise nodded. "That's legacy." Victor smiled. "We don't just build cures, we build futures." That night, he sat on the balcony with Maya. The city glimmered below. "Do you think it'll ever be enough?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. Probably not, he admitted. But every brick we lay makes it harder for them to rebuild the old walls. That's enough for now. She leaned against his arm, watching the stars, her world forever changed by the weight he carried and the hope he lit. Victor stood at the head of the conference table, eyes fixed on the giant screen behind him. The MedCorps leadership team sat silent, watching as the new projections flickered to life graphs showing national support, community engagement, rising interest in the company's outreach programs. This isn't just a phase, Victor began, voice steady. This is the real shift. We either lead it or get buried trying. The room nodded in near unanimous resolve, but not everyone looked convinced. Across the table, Neil Granger, an older board member with deep roots in traditional biotech lobbying, leaned back with a skeptical smirk. All due respect, Victor, but these outreach programs won't mean much if our stock dips again. Investors don't fund revolutions, they fund returns. Victor met his eyes. Then maybe we're not the company for every investor anymore. A murmur stirred the room. Denise, seated nearby, added firmly, the ones that matter are staying, because they see what we're building: resilience, reputation, real impact. Later that day, Victor walked into the lab. It was quieter than usual, with many scientists now juggling both R&D and media briefings. He watched a young intern recalibrating a monitor. "How's it going?" he asked. The girl looked up, surprised. "Oh, Dr. Freeman, it's going well. Just running simulations for the new metabolic treatment pathways." He nodded, proud. "You feel good about the work?" "Honestly," she said, hesitating, "it's the first time I feel like it really matters. Like someone's watching. Like we're not invisible anymore." That night, Victor found himself standing outside Harlem's historic Langston Hall, where a town hall meeting on equitable healthcare was being held. The building buzzed with energy elders, students, pastors, nurses, all gathered not to debate but to plan. Inside, Victor was greeted with a standing ovation. He waved it off gently, stepping to the podium. "I'm not here tonight to be thanked," he began. "I'm here because the people who came before me didn't get this microphone. They were silenced, discredited, erased. So if my voice is loud, it's only because it carries theirs." A woman in the front row called out, "Then keep shouting, baby." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Back at MedCorps, things weren't all celebration. Hackers had breached their public-facing servers, leaking partial patient data. No medical records, but enough to raise alarm. Victor was briefed immediately. "We're handling it," said Maya Chen, head of cybersecurity. "But this wasn't some amateur operation. It's a message." Victor narrowed his gaze. Message received. "Let's send one back, tighten our digital walls, and go fully transparent with the public. No secrets." Denise raised an eyebrow. "You want to release a statement admitting the breach?" "Yes. And we include every safeguard we're implementing. We show people we're not untouchable, we're accountable." Over the weekend, Victor and Maya took a walk through Riverside Park. The spring wind cut through the trees, the Hudson glinting in the distance. Maya skipped beside him, trying to balance on the edge of the path. "People at school say you're famous now," she said. "Famous isn't the same as free," he replied. She looked up, puzzled. "Free from what?" "From being second, guest. From having to be twice as good just to be called decent. From walking into rooms where people see your skin before your work." She was quiet for a while. "Do you think I'll have to fight like that too?" "I hope not," he said. "But if you do, you'll know how." Monday brought a surprise. A call from the White House. They wanted Victor to join the President's Advisory Council on Health Equity. It was ceremonial, yes, but symbolic in a way that couldn't be ignored. At the televised announcement, Victor stood among other honorees, doctors, educators, policymakers. Cameras flashed. When it was his turn to speak, he kept it brief. Equity isn't about extra. It's about enough. It's about making sure excellence isn't a privilege for the few, but a right for the many. The quote went viral. Later, in a quiet hallway, a senior official whispered, "You're not just building biotech. You're rewriting the ethics manual." Still, the Whitmores weren't done. A sudden smear campaign launched overnight, doctored emails, fake allegations about mishandling research funds. Even a deepfake video emerged, showing Victor supposedly making anti-white comments. It was crude, but effective in triggering doubt among conservative donors. Victor's legal team moved fast, tracing the origins to a third-party firm linked indirectly but clearly to the Whitmore Foundation. At a private dinner with allies, Denise fumed. "They won't stop until they ruin you." Victor sipped his drink. "Then we make sure I'm not the only one they have to ruin." "What do you mean?" someone asked. He smiled faintly. "We elevate more voices. We build redundancies in leadership. This isn't about me anymore, it's a blueprint." He reached out to historically black colleges, setting up innovation fellowships. He funded community health startups. He hosted town hall forums with rural hospitals in Appalachia and the Deep South. Slowly, a new kind of coalition formed, not just black or brown, but working-class white nurses, underfunded tribal clinics, immigrant doctors. They didn't look alike, but they all had one thing in common. They'd been left behind by the old system. One evening, Victor sat on his porch, staring at the skyline. Maya brought him a notebook. "What's this?" he asked. "Your next speech," she grinned. He opened it. Inside were simple crayon-drawn pages. A family sitting in a waiting room, a doctor listening, a child smiling. Above it she'd written, "Care should look like love." His throat tightened. "That's better than anything I've said," he whispered. "Then say it louder," she replied. And just like that, he knew Chapter 6 of the fight had already begun. Not in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in classrooms, playgrounds, and dinner tables. It wasn't just about taking down the unjust anymore. It was about building something worth handing down, something whole, something real, something that even the darkest money couldn't erase. Victor stood in the elevator of the Whitmore Tower, 37 stories above Manhattan, watching the floor numbers descend slowly toward the lobby. He wasn't here for business today. He was here to meet the foundation board. The invitation had come unexpectedly, an olive branch, or perhaps a trap. Either way, he accepted. At the lobby, a sharply dressed man with a security earpiece approached him. "Mr. Freeman, the board is waiting. This way, please." Victor followed without a word, his shoes clicking across marble floors so polished they reflected the overhead lights like water. They entered the private meeting suite, wood-paneled walls, oil paintings, silver tea service laid out untouched. At the far end sat the members of the Whitmore Foundation, minus Rose. Her father, Charles Whitmore, cleared his throat. "Mr. Freeman," he began, not rising, "we appreciate your time. Let's get to the point. This war between us, it's exhausting, for both sides. There must be a better path." Victor sat slowly, resting his hands on the polished oak. "A war you started, with lies, with sabotage, with cowardice." Charles offered a tight smile. "You're an idealist. I respect that. But legacy institutions are delicate. The more you dig, the more unstable the whole system becomes. What happens then? Chaos?" Victor's voice dropped. "If your system can't withstand the truth, it deserves to collapse." Another board member interjected. "Let's be honest. You've made your point. You have momentum, but you're still outnumbered. Let's talk about compromise. Maybe you take your seat back at the table. We work together on limited reforms." Quietly, Victor stared at them, then laughed low and bitter. "You want me to silence myself in exchange for access. Again, you want me to betray the very people who trusted me to speak." He stood up. "Tell Rose when she's ready to apologize, not to me, but to every patient she profited from. I'll be listening. Until then, keep your table. I'm building my own." He walked out, leaving behind a silence heavy with resentment. Outside, the press had caught wind of the meeting. As Victor stepped out of the building, microphones were thrust toward him. "Mr. Freeman, did the Whitmores offer you a truce? Is reconciliation possible?" He paused, then looked directly into the cameras. "Reconciliation without justice is just a photo op, and I don't pose for injustice." The clip trended within hours. Back at MedCorps, Victor was met with both admiration and concern. Martin closed the door behind them. "You realize they won't back off now. They're cornered. This might get uglier." Victor nodded. "Then we fight smarter. I want every legal avenue ready, every community partnership solidified. If they want war, let them choke on their own hypocrisy." Denise entered holding her phone. "You need to see this." A new video had surfaced, this time real. An internal whistleblower from Whitmore Biotech had released documents proving they had knowingly delayed FDA disclosures about failed trials affecting predominantly black participants. The fallout was immediate. Public outcry exploded. Congressional investigations reopened. Rose Whitmore's image, already fraying, crumbled entirely. She went into seclusion. Her father resigned from 2 boards within 24 hours. Victor, however, didn't gloat. He doubled down on building. That weekend, he visited a community clinic in Atlanta. The waiting room was full, mostly elders. He sat with them, listened to their stories. "Doctors used to talk to us like we didn't matter," one woman said. "But you make us feel seen." He looked her in the eyes. "You've always mattered. They just never wanted to admit it." In the evening, he gave a small speech in the parking lot. "This isn't just about healthcare. It's about dignity, about whose pain gets believed, whose lives get protected. We're rewriting the terms." Meanwhile, Maya was preparing for her school's debate championship. Her topic, ethics in science. Victor helped her rehearse. One evening, as she practiced in the living room, she paused mid-sentence. "Dad, do you think people like us will ever stop having to explain our right to be here?" He knelt beside her. "Maybe not in our lifetime. But if we keep showing up, telling the truth, building what they said we couldn't, they'll run out of ways to deny it." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep showing up." The day of her debate, she wore a navy blazer and a pin that read, "Justice is science." Her speech was clear, passionate, uncompromising. She won first place. Victor wept quietly in the back row. In the days that followed, MedCorps launched the Evelyn Ford Fellowship officially. Dozens of applications poured in. Mobile clinics were deployed across 3 states. Victor was invited to speak at Johns Hopkins, then MIT, then a rural high school in Mississippi. At each stop, he said the same thing: the future isn't waiting for permission anymore. During one of these trips, he received a handwritten note slipped into his hotel door. No signature, just 6 words. They underestimated the quiet ones. Keep going. But shadows still lingered. One night, Victor received a message from an anonymous source, a cache of emails, implicating several powerful politicians in obstructing early investigations into Whitmore's practices. The evidence was explosive. Denise reviewed it. "If we release this," she said, "we're not just taking on big pharma, we're taking on government infrastructure. Are you ready for that?" Victor stared out the window. It's not about readiness, it's about responsibility. That week, Victor coordinated with a network of journalists, fact-checkers, and legal watchdogs. The story broke wide. The backlash was immediate threats, lawsuits, demands for retraction. But it held. The evidence was too solid. A Senate Ethics Committee was formed. Whistleblower protections were extended. And Victor? He became more than a CEO. He became a symbol, not of perfection, but of persistence, of what it meant to stare down power and not blink. One evening, after a long day of interviews and briefings, Victor returned home to find Maya asleep on the couch, a book resting on her chest. He covered her with a blanket, then sat beside her. On the coffee table was a copy of her winning debate speech. He picked it up, reading the final line out loud to the quiet room. "Justice isn't something we wait for, it's something we walk toward, one voice, one step, one truth at a time." He looked at her, peaceful in sleep, and whispered, "And I'll keep walking. For you, for all of us." The city outside buzzed with uncertainty, but inside that room, a single light glowed steady, unyielding, relentless, a beacon in the storm. Victor stood beneath the awning of the Brooklyn Community Health Fair, rain pattering gently on the canvas above, the scent of roasted peanuts and fresh pretzels mixing with the crisp April air. Around him, MedCorps' mobile clinics hummed with energy nurses taking blood pressure, technicians running diagnostics, kids laughing as they left with stickers and lollipops. He wasn't here as a guest of honor today. He was just another volunteer. He helped lift a crate of bottled water, handed out pamphlets, and took time to sit with patients who remembered him not as a CEO, but as the man who'd once stood on a makeshift stage and promised change. "You kept your word," an older man told him. "You didn't sell us out." Victor shook his head. "I'm still paying the price for not selling out." That night, after the fair had wrapped, Victor returned to the MedCorps offices to review financials. Denise was already there, poring over spreadsheets. "We need a buffer," she said without looking up. "If the lawsuits hit hard, we could take a liquidity punch." Victor rubbed his temples. "Sell the Santa Clara expansion. It can wait." It'll cost us market share. Better than losing the mission. Denise looked at him with a mix of admiration and frustration. You ever gonna let yourself win, Victor? He smiled faintly. Winning looks different from where we started. The following week, Victor received a surprise email from Rose Whitmore. It wasn't an apology, far from it, but it was a request. She wanted to meet, not in a boardroom, in private. He agreed, reluctantly. They met at a botanical garden in the Bronx, a quiet corner away from cameras and legacy ghosts. Rose looked different, tired, unpolished. You destroyed my family, she said, no preamble. Victor met her gaze calmly. Number, your family destroyed itself. I just stopped covering for it. She sat on a nearby bench. They cut me off, the board, my father. I'm on my own now. You'll survive, he said flatly. You were never the victim, Rose, just a beneficiary who refused to ask where the benefits came from. She hesitated. I want to help now. Use what I know. Expose more. Victor crossed his arms. Why? Guilt? Fear, she admitted. And guilt. But also because I'm tired of the rot. He studied her. Then prove it, publicly, not in whispers. She nodded slowly. Okay. Their meeting ended with no handshake, no warmth. Just the echo of footsteps on wet stone as they walked away from each other, two figures finally unentangled from a history of convenience and silence. Days later, Rose released a personal video confession. She detailed the cover-ups, the manipulation, the pressure to suppress trials. The reaction was explosive. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Whistleblowers began coming forward from other companies. A movement swelled. Victor watched it all unfold with a cautious heart. At a televised town hall in Chicago, he addressed a packed auditorium. This isn't the end of a scandal, he said. It's the start of an awakening. And awakenings are messy. But if we want truth, we have to let it be loud. The audience erupted in applause, not because he was charismatic, but because he was real. That night, Victor received a call from his estranged brother, Isaiah. It had been years. Their paths had diverged, Victor to medicine, Isaiah to factory work, then to quiet bitterness. You said something on television, Isaiah began, voice gruff, about truth being loud. Made me think maybe I should have shouted more back then. Victor's throat tightened. Maybe we both should have. Isaiah chuckled. You did okay. Proud of you, man. Just don't forget where we came from. Never, Victor said softly. The call ended, but the weight of it lingered. In the following weeks, MedCorps' influence expanded in unexpected ways. Schools began adopting their health curriculum. Churches requested partnerships for wellness programs. Retired military doctors offered to volunteer. At a strategy meeting, Denise announced that their community trust score had reached 92%. That's higher than some national institutions, she grinned. Victor raised an eyebrow. Then let's act like it. Transparency reports. Open source trials. No more closed doors. Martin, always the realist, added, it'll slow us down. Then we move with purpose, not panic, Victor replied. But not all the news was good. A major donor withdrew after political pressure. Online threats increased. And one evening, Victor's car tires were slashed outside his apartment. Maya found him crouching in the garage. Was it them? She asked, fear in her voice. Maybe, he replied, standing slowly. But we're not going to stop. She nodded solemnly. Then I won't be scared either. They rode the train to school the next morning instead, blending in with the city's quiet rush of resilience. One of the most moving moments came at a funeral. Evelyn Ford's husband had passed quietly, at home. Victor attended without fanfare, standing in the back of the modest chapel. After the service, Evelyn approached him. He believed in you, she said, placing a frail hand on his arm. Said you were a storm that planted seeds. Victor bowed his head. He gave me shelter when I had none. I owe him everything. She smiled through tears. Then pay it forward. Inspired, Victor launched the Roots and Rain initiative, a program focused on generational mentorship. It paired young scientists with retired professionals, many of whom had once been sidelined due to race, gender, or poverty. The stories that emerged of breakthroughs, losses, triumphs fed back into the soul of MedCorps. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was a movement. As Chapter 8 drew to a close, Victor found himself once again walking with Maya along the Hudson. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the water. "Do you ever miss the quiet life?" she asked. He smiled. "I miss the illusion of it, but not the silence." She looked up. "What happens if they come after us harder?" "Then we stand taller," he said. "Because every time they try to push us down, they remind us how strong we have to be." She reached for his hand. "Then let's keep walking." And they did, footsteps steady, hearts aligned, shadows behind them, and the long road of justice still stretching forward. Victor stood in front of the Senate Oversight Committee, the air in the chamber thick with tension and artificial politeness. Cameras lined the back wall, and senators whispered to their aides as Victor adjusted the microphone. He wore a dark navy suit, modest but sharp, and carried with him not just evidence, but presence. The kind of presence that made even the most powerful lean in. "Mr. Freeman," began Senator Kellerman, a man whose family name adorned several hospital wings across the country, "you've accused members of this very institution of obstructing healthcare justice. Are you suggesting the system itself is corrupt?" Victor didn't blink. "I'm not suggesting, I'm stating, with documented proof." A low murmur rippled through the room. "And let me be clear," Victor continued, "this isn't just about me or my company. This is about every community left behind. Every mother whose child died waiting for an approval that never came. Every veteran who trusted a pill that was never properly tested." Kellerman leaned forward, feigning concern. "But isn't there a danger in making the public lose faith in its own institutions?" Victor's voice dropped an octave, but grew in clarity. "The public didn't lose faith, it was stolen from them. Piece by piece, by negligence, by greed, by your silence." The gallery erupted in gasps and scattered applause before the gavel pounded for order. Outside the chamber, the nation was watching. Inside, the power structure trembled. Later that evening, Victor returned to his hotel room, exhausted. Maya called him on FaceTime. "You looked calm," she said, munching on cereal, her science fair project visible behind her. "I was terrified," he admitted, kicking off his shoes. "But sometimes, courage is just standing still when they want you to run." "Well, you didn't run," she smiled. "You made them listen." He looked at her proudly. "You keep reminding me why this matters." She nodded. "I know, because people need to know they deserve more." Victor whispered, "Exactly." The next morning, Denise met him with updates. "We're being sued again. Libel, defamation, breach of confidentiality, and a few anonymous threats." Victor sighed. "Anything new?" "Yeah, a counter-campaign. Quiet, but coordinated. They're painting you as radical, reckless, a dangerous figure with a vendetta." Victor raised an eyebrow. "So now I'm dangerous." "Congratulations," Denise said dryly. "You're finally taking up space they can't ignore." Victor chuckled. "Then we keep pushing." "I hope you're right," she said, "because the next few weeks, they're going to be war." As predicted, the backlash escalated. Editorials in elite papers called him divisive. Anonymous sources leaked stories about his past, exaggerated, half-true, designed to sow doubt. One morning, a billboard went up outside MedCorps headquarters with Victor's face crossed out and the words, "Not our voice." Martin was livid. "We sue. We counter-advertise. We buy airtime." "No," Victor interrupted. "We stay the course. Let our work speak." And it did. Clinics stayed open. Patients flooded in. Community leaders rallied. Even skeptical journalists began to shift tone. But not everyone could hold the line. A promising MedCorps executive resigned, citing pressure from old colleagues. A donor pulled out. Then, Rose Whitmore disappeared from public view completely, her social media scrubbed. Last known appearance, a small, unassuming clinic in Detroit. Victor received a letter a week later, written in her elegant hand. "I thought speaking would be enough," it read. "But silence is louder than I expected. I'm not strong like you. I wish I were." Victor folded the letter slowly, grief flashing across his face. Not grief for her, grief for the system that created her, used her, and discarded her when she outlived her usefulness. Meanwhile, Maya presented her science fair project on community water testing. Her presentation, held in a modest school gym, was raw, brilliant, and powerful. She began, "Clean water isn't a luxury, it's a right. So I decided not to wait for someone else to test it. I did it myself." The judges were stunned. She won, of course, but more importantly, local officials took note and reached out to collaborate. That night, Victor took her to a diner. Over grilled cheese and milkshakes, he said, "You didn't just win, you started something." She smiled. "I learned from the best." At MedCore, Denise proposed a bold idea. Let's create a transparency network, a database of trial results, patient outcomes, drug side effects, open source, crowd verified. Victor leaned back. "They'll hate us for it. They already do." He smiled. "Let's do it." The project launched under the name Light Table. Within days, thousands of doctors, patients, and researchers logged in. Stories emerged of delayed approvals, hidden trials, misdiagnosed reactions. For the first time, truth had a platform louder than profit. As the election season crept in, politicians began co-opting Victor's language, some genuinely, most not. He refused endorsements, stayed independent. "This isn't about left or right," he said on national radio. "It's about right and wrong." But one voice cut through the noise. Congressman Elijah Moss, a Vietnam vet turned civil rights lawyer, invited Victor to speak on the floor of the House. "What you're doing," Moss told him, "isn't just medicine, it's reclamation of dignity, of democracy." Victor agreed, reluctantly. When he stood before Congress, he began not with statistics, but with a story. "My mother," he said, "worked 2 jobs, cleaned homes by day, folded linens by night. When she got sick, she didn't trust the hospitals. Said they never saw her, just another body, another number. She died believing she was invisible. I built MedCore so no one else would have to live like that, or die like that." The room was silent. Then, slowly, people stood. Applause rolled through the chamber, not performative, but solemn, a recognition. Back home, Maya painted a mural on the garage wall, Victor and Evelyn Ford, side by side. Underneath she wrote, "Truth is louder than power." When he saw it, he didn't speak. He just held her, the quiet of legacy settling between them like sunrise. But the fight was far from over. A new bill threatened to restrict nonprofit data access. Lobbyists were rallying. A fresh wave of smear tactics loomed. Victor stood with his team in the MedCore war room. "This next chapter," he said, "won't be easier. But we're not here because it's easy. We're here because it matters." They nodded. Warriors in lab coats, advocates in scrubs, soldiers of justice armed with nothing but truth. As he left that night, Victor paused under the street lamp outside. Rain began to fall again, soft and steady. He tilted his face upward, letting it wash over him, not to cleanse, but to remember. Every drop was a name, a story, a reason. And as he walked into the darkness, there was no fear, only resolve. Because justice doesn't sleep, and neither would he. Victor stood at the helm of the MedCore boardroom, early sunlight slicing through tall windows to illuminate teams, clustered around laptops, stacks of legal pads, and debated timelines. "Today we launch our most ambitious project yet," he began, voice steady. "We call it Liberation Labs." Heads nodded, but a few lips tightened, some executives concerned about risk, others wary of optics. Victor continued, "This isn't just research, it's reparative science. We partner with historically excluded communities to design therapies with them, for them, ownership, oversight, agency." Denise raised her hand. "We've secured federal grants and support from reproductive justice groups and veteran health advocates." Martin chimed in. "We've also got legal teams ready to defend if it's framed as radical activism, not medical advancement." Victor nodded gravely. "Perfect, because it is both." And, weeks later, MedCore sent Liberation Labs teams into rural Alabama, native reservations in Arizona, Appalachian Towns regions long neglected by mainstream clinical trials. Doctors traveled in vans built by local manufacturers, clinics set up in community centers and high school gyms. Testing protocols were translated into several indigenous languages. Patients were paid and treated with dignity, often joining the research team as paid participants and data stewards. The impact was seismic. In towns where mistrust of medicine ran deep, enrollment rates surged. Communities once abandoned by trials now helped shape treatment regimens. Stories poured in, veterans healed, mothers breathing after asthma reversals, elders regaining mobility. Local news outlets ran features. National stories followed. Liberation Labs seemed to redefine what community health meant in America. But with progress came backlash. A national news network aired a segment titled Activism or Science: MedCorps' Experiment in Politics. Former board members leaked criticism. This isn't scalable. It's niche. A think tank issued warnings, compromising scientific purity for ideology. Victor watched it all. He didn't respond publicly. Instead, he visited the Liberty Mental Health Clinic in Detroit, one of the pilot sites. A nurse approached him. People here cried today they didn't think change would come this fast. He knelt to meet her eyes. Change doesn't wait for permission. Residents lined up to thank him, offering heaping plates of soul food, homemade pies from church-baked sales. He accepted every slice, every prayer. Meanwhile, the DOJ investigation into Whitmore Pharmaceuticals progressed. Federal prosecutors announced they had gathered evidence of sweeping corporate malfeasance, trial suppression, bribed regulators, even bribery of political staffers. Rose Whitmore was indicted on multiple counts. The Whitmore Family Foundation collapsed. Victor refused to celebrate. Instead, he requested a meeting with the U.S. attorney leading the case, a black woman with a reputation for unrelenting pursuit of truth. In that meeting, Victor offered support, insights, documentation, community voices to testify. "We built something," he said, "and now we want justice, not revenge." She nodded. "Your company showed what happens when science serves humanity instead of profit. That can't be undone." At home, Maya asked Victor to say grace before dinner. He paused, looking around their Harlem dining room filled with modest, mismatched chairs and the microwave humming. He said quietly, "We give thanks for those who dared to trust, for those who speak when silence paid off long ago, and for tomorrow may we be brave enough to shape it." Later, after Maya went to bed, Victor reviewed a folder marked Liberation Labs Outreach. Photos of kids in lab coats with oversized goggles, elders teaching interns about traditional herbs, community members signing consent forms while nursing babies on laps. He placed the folder beside Maya's mural. On top, her words, "Truth is louder than power." MedCorps' internal report arrived. Metrics showed 40% increase in patient diversity for active trials, double the data transparency participation rates, and a 25% boost in cross-region collaboration. The board unanimously approved a new branch, MedCorps Community Enterprises, designed to spin off local labs that the community could own and manage. Victor addressed the team. "We're not just delivering cures, we're rebuilding trust. We're creating shared ownership in science." Tears glistened in Denise's eyes. "We're doing what they said was impossible," she whispered. Yet not all challenges faded. A rival pharmaceutical consortium sued Whitmore's old partners, naming MedCorps as a co-conspirator. Murmurs echoed, "Freeman is playing in dangerous territory." Media pundits questioned alliances with tribal clinics. Conservative think tanks issued statements about government overreach, disguised as altruism. Victor held firm. He answered with data packets, patient letters, testimonials. He framed everything with confidentiality consent and community consent forms. Liberation Labs thrived under scrutiny, not despite it. One evening, he flew to Atlanta to attend a conference for tribal healthcare leaders. A council elder approached him after his speech. "We've had treaties broken before," she said, "but this feels different. It feels like promise." Victor shook her hand. "We aim to be partners, not border crossers." At the airport the next day, Frosted magazine covered him with the headline, "The Scientist as Ally." He refused the cover shoot interview, but accepted a short Q&A where he said, "Medicine only heals when it acknowledges its past wounds." Back home, a viral school assignment arrived in his inbox. Maya's class wrote letters to him, many in childish cursive. "Thank you for teaching me that science is more than test tubes," one read. Another, "Because of you, I want to be a doctor who puts people first." He read them aloud to Denise. She leaned on his shoulder. "We started something," he said. "Yeah," she replied. "And it's just beginning." As Chapter 10 neared its end, MedCorps shipped its first mobile lab built in partnership with a Black-owned manufacturing collective in Birmingham. The van rolled out under a banner reading "Science in Service of Life." Victor watched the ribbon cutting via live stream on his phone, standing next to Maya at home. Her eyes shone. "It's real," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "Yes," he whispered back. "And it never would have been if we'd stayed silent." Night fell. The city lights shimmered, and inside, a quiet revolution glowed, steady one, born of courage, nurtured in trust, and bound to justice. Victor stepped off the train at Union Station in Washington, D.C., briefcase in one hand, heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't here for a hearing or a press conference this time. It was war in the quietest, most brutal sense, behind closed doors. He had received word that a secret consortium of pharmaceutical giants, along with certain members of Congress, had drafted a proposal to revoke tax-exempt status for nonprofit research organizations like MedCorp. "It's retaliation," Denise had said, furious. "They can't discredit you publicly, so now they'll try to bankrupt us in silence." Victor wasn't surprised. They had underestimated him for too long. But what they failed to understand was that he had stopped working alone long ago. As he walked through the marble corridors of Capitol Hill, memories flooded back of his mother folding laundry late at night, of Maya asking hard questions about justice, of the first patients who trusted him when there was nothing to gain. He arrived at room 412, where the shadow meeting was to be held. No media, no transparency, just power behind doors. As he entered, suits turned. A few faces registered irritation, others guilt, and some outright hostility. Senator Kellerman leaned back in his chair, clearly annoyed. "Mr. Freeman, this is a private drafting session, which concerns public funding," Victor replied. "And that means I'm very much supposed to be here." "You're not a lobbyist," another voice muttered. "No," Victor said, placing his briefcase on the table and flipping it open. "I'm the reason half your districts are finally seeing health outcomes improve, so you'll want to hear what I've brought." He distributed folders containing undeniable metrics, community trial data, fiscal reports showing MedCorp's efficiency, testimonies from patients and doctors across the nation. Silence filled the room. Then Kellerman cleared his throat. "Be that as it may, there are concerns about influence, about ideology in medicine." Victor leaned forward. "There's no ideology in giving someone clean water. There's no politics in treating an asthmatic child in Alabama whose lungs were forgotten. What you're afraid of isn't ideology, it's accountability." One senator stood up. "You're turning medicine into a social movement." Victor met his gaze. "Maybe it always should have been." The meeting broke down after that. Tensions snapped. But Victor knew he had bought time enough to mobilize. Back in Harlem, he convened the MedCorp advisory team. "This isn't just about us. It's about every grassroots clinic that followed our lead. If they cut the funding net beneath us, hundreds of thousands lose access overnight." "Then we go louder," Denise said. "We bring it to the people." And they did. Within 48 hours, MedCorp released a powerful ad campaign, not glossy or corporate, but raw and intimate. Patients from Appalachia, the Navajo Nation, Detroit, Oakland, and Baton Rouge told their stories, not of miracle cures, but of being seen. A veteran with PTSD, "They listened to me before they dosed me." A mother in Mississippi, "They asked what I could afford, not what I was worth." The campaign went viral. Community rallies formed. Petitions amassed millions of signatures. Churches organized teach-ins. Retired doctors held sidewalk clinics wearing buttons that read, "I stand with MedCorp." Even celebrities, cautiously at first, began speaking up. But the most powerful endorsement came from an unlikely source, Elijah Moss, the aging congressman who had once questioned Victor's reach, now rose in a House session and declared, "We are witnessing what it looks like when truth disrupts tradition, and that frightens people. But let me be clear, fear is not governance." Victor watched that speech beside Maya, hand on her shoulder. She leaned her head against him. "It's working, Dad. You're winning." He shook his head gently. "We're surviving, but there's still one more door we haven't opened." The Whitmore estate, long shuttered after the scandal, had remained oddly untouched by public discourse. Victor had stayed silent about the last private conversation he had with Rose, until now. He opened his email drafts and retrieved the transcript she had written but never sent a confession, a manifesto. She detailed how the family's wealth had long manipulated drug policy, buried clinical trials, and bought silence. She also admitted she had once believed in the system until she saw it destroy lives. With her permission before vanishing, she had told Victor, "Use it when it matters." He published the letter. The impact was nuclear. Networks scrambled. Analysts dissected. Former Whitmore board members resigned in disgrace. Class action lawsuits reignited. But more importantly, survivors came forward. Lab techs, former executives, even janitors who remembered shredders running overnight. In a final act of pressure, Kellerman and his allies moved to rush the vote on the MedCorps defunding amendment. The hearing was set for 72 hours later. Victor knew this was at the moment where either truth would hold or the tide would swallow them whole. The night before the hearing, Maya came into his study, holding her school book. "Can I read something to you?" He nodded. She opened her history text and read aloud a quote from Frederick Douglass. "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." She looked up. "You demanded, didn't you?" He smiled. "Every day. Then don't stop now." At the hearing, Victor entered the chamber flanked by a coalition doctors in coats, patients in wheelchairs, students, community elders. He spoke last, and he didn't use charts or statistics. "This isn't about me," he began. "It's about Mrs. Rodriguez, who now sees a doctor in her own language. About Jamal, who finally knows what his son's rare disease is called. About Lucille, who thought her pain was just old age, until a young black nurse told her she deserved to feel better. You can vote to fund war, to fund walls, or you can fund healing." As he stepped down, there was silence, then applause, hesitant, then growing. The amendment was struck down. MedCorps was safe for now. But Victor knew safety was an illusion. What they had gained wasn't protection. It was proof. Proof that truth, when spoken collectively, could no longer be ignored. That night, standing in his kitchen with Denise and Maya, Victor raised a toast with lemonade. To what we built, to what they tried to bury, and to what refused to die. In the corner of the room, Maya's mural caught the last rays of sunset, and beneath it, etched in her careful handwriting, a new phrase had been added: "We are the medicine." The morning sun cast a golden hue over Harlem as Victor laced up his shoes. The air smelled of fresh bread from the corner bakery and the faint trace of engine oil from passing delivery trucks. Today was unlike any other. Liberation Labs was officially opening its flagship community center on 125th Street. It had taken years, 1,000 late nights, and the unrelenting push of voices once silenced, but they had made it. As he stepped out the door, Maya ran up behind him, clutching her sketchpad. "Can I show them my mural today?" she asked. Victor smiled and brushed a lock of hair from her face. "Today, kiddo, you show them what hope looks like." End footnote. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the street was lined with people, seniors in wheelchairs, draped in handmade quilts, teens in STEM club hoodies, mothers holding toddlers, clergy members, retired nurses, and even former critics. Denise, standing at the podium, cleared her throat. "We are not here because someone gave us permission. We are here because communities demanded it. This building," she gestured, "is not a monument to science. It's a testament to listening." Applause followed. The crowd parted as Victor stepped forward. "There was a time," he began, "when being black in science meant you had to smile twice as hard, speak twice as soft, and prove your worth 3 times over. But we're done proving. We are practicing." The crowd erupted in cheers. Inside these walls, you'll find research born from conversation, diagnostics rooted in cultural fluency, and healing driven by partnership. Inside the building, the design was unlike any sterile hospital. Walls were lined with murals, many painted by Maya, showing intergenerational families, indigenous healers, and scientists of all races. There was a kitchen where elders would teach nutrition workshops, and a story room where patients shared health narratives that were turned into data for better treatments. Community data stewards walked visitors through how their information would be used, offering consent forms explained in plain English and multiple languages. It was science, but it breathed. The press tried to keep up. Headlines varied. Harlem's Healing Hub. Victor Freeman redefines medicine. Politics of compassion. Fox ran an op-ed calling it Science Gone Soft. Victor didn't flinch. He had long stopped seeking validation from those who never cared. Instead, he focused on the next phase, replicating the model. Cities like Detroit, Tulsa, Fresno, and New Orleans requested blueprints. Indigenous coalitions asked for partnership frameworks. Even abroad, grassroots groups in Nairobi and Mumbai reached out. The dream was no longer his, it was everyone's. But just as the work seemed to expand boundlessly, something grounded Victor back to earth: his mother's journal. Maya had found it in a sealed box during a spring cleaning spree. Inside were faded ink entries, scribbled prayers, and pressed flowers. One entry stood out: "I hope one day Victor will build something that outlives pain. That says we mattered." He read it aloud at a staff gathering, voice trembling. She didn't want money, she didn't dream of power, she just wanted a world where her son could build without fear. The final test came when a biotech giant offered to acquire Liberation Labs outright for $900 million. The board was divided. "Think of what we could do with that money," one executive argued. "More labs, more reach." Victor shook his head. "And who decides how that money's used? Them." He met every board member's eyes. "We weren't born from capital. We were born from crisis. Selling would be our end, not our beginning." The vote was tense. It came down to a single tie, breaking ballot Denise's. She looked at Victor, then the rest of the board. "We've already proven we can build without compromise. Let's not start now." The deal was declined. The room exhaled in relief. Back in Harlem, Victor took Maya to the rooftop garden above Liberation Labs. She pointed out the plants: okra, collards, sage, hibiscus. "Why these?" he asked. "Because they heal," she said. "Just like us." He laughed softly. "You're wiser than your years." She looked up. "You think the world's different now?" He paused. "It's not perfect, but it listens more, and that's the beginning of everything." She nodded, then handed him a new sketch. It was a mural of him, standing in front of Liberation Labs, surrounded by silhouettes of people from every walk of life, with the words, "Truth doesn't whisper anymore." That evening, Victor received a letter from the president, inviting him to join a new National Health Equity Council. He smiled, folded it carefully, and slid it beside his mother's journal. The spotlight was never his goal. His mission had always been quiet, patient work that echoed loudest in rooms where people finally felt seen. He knew battles still loomed. But for tonight, under a sky slowly turning to twilight, with laughter from a nearby chess game and the smell of Maya's freshly baked cornbread wafting from the downstairs kitchen, he allowed himself a moment of stillness. Because stories like his weren't meant to end in thunder, they ended in roots, growing deep and wide, holding ground for those yet to come. And somewhere, a child picked up a stethoscope not because of a television show, but because she saw herself in science. Somewhere, a grandmother swallowed a pill without fear. Somewhere, an old prejudice crumbled quietly. And somewhere, maybe even in a place forgotten by maps, hope arrived in the form of a mobile lab, rolling down the road with painted words across its side. "We are the medicine." The story of Victor Freeman reminds us that true justice isn't always loud. It's often quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in resilience. It teaches us that standing up against systemic injustice requires not only courage but community, integrity, and the unwillingness to sell out even when the price is high. In a world that often silences those who challenge the norm, Victor's journey is a powerful testament that transformation begins when one voice dares to speak for many.